Hello and welcome. Today I am going to be sharing a quick and easy tutorial for making a scrappy book border. This is a border that looks like a shelf of books. And this is great for any quilt that you're making, but especially for quilt panels. This quilt features a quilt panel from the Littlest Family's Big Day collection by Emily Winfield Martin for Riley Blake Designs. And it's just full of just the most charming illustrations. To that, I added a 1.5 inch strip all around of Riley Blake Cloud from their Confetti Cotton Basics. And I chose this to mimic this off-white faux sashing / border in the quilt panel. And I just wanted to repeat that. And then I added this 2.5 inch strip all around of this gorgeous floral, and then another cloud border, and it's also 1.5 inch. And then I want to finish it off with this book border because this panel and collection is based on a children's book. I thought I would just follow with that book theme. So this is easy. This is a great scrap buster. If you've got a bunch of scraps that you just love and you're not sure how to use them, this is a great way to show those off. So I'm going to show you how I do this, and it's not an exact science. You can adjust it to fit your quilt and any size that you want. The challenge that comes with making this type of border is that each quilt is unique. So you might choose to make a 6 inch wide border, and I might be making a 15 inch wide border or whatever it is. So I'm going to show you how I make this specific one, and then you can adjust it to your quilt. The other change that might be happening is if you're making a scrappy quilt, you're going to make each individual strip instead of in long bulk rows like I'm going to be doing here. And so you can actually make more exact measurements that way. So I started with, this is a 7 inch wide by, let's see, 18 inch, 7 by 18 inch. I actually found with my other strips that I made, I preferred an 8 inch wide. It gave me a little more leeway to play with, but for illustration purposes, I'm going to use this 7 inch wide. And then this is a 6 inch wide of the white, which is kind of the bookshelf background fabric. And I'm just going to sew these together. And then you will press this open. And then from that, you're just going to cut, using your ruler, you'll cut, I cut from 2.25 inch, a 2.25 inch strip. Then I went down to 2 inch, then 1 3/4, 1.5, and 1 1/4. I didn't go smaller than that. Of course you can if you want them super skinny, especially if you're doing a smaller border. So I went from 2.25 down to 1 1/4 and cut in 1/4 inch increments. So you'll see here, here's a wider strip, and then it gets a little narrower and then very narrow. So that's how I did it. And I also sewed a whole stack of these and cut about 4 at a time to make it easier. So I ended up with just piles of these strips ready to go. So now I'm going to show you how I assemble them together. I found the easiest way to start is to start with a strip that is the measurement that you want all of your strips to end up at. So this is 9.5 inches. I know when I'm finished, I'm going to trim about 1/2 inch on the entire length of my strip, but 9.5 gives me wiggle room because this will end up uneven and a little crooked, and then you're going to want to trim it off at the end. So I start with this, and then I just want to kind of alternate in size and in color. So here's a different color, and I think I'm just going to make this book a little bit lower than the top of the first book. This would be the top of the book. And you see you're going to have excess, so you can play around with this. You can make it taller. You can make it go really small. It doesn't matter. And you want it to be kind of random looking. And then you just stitch it together. I don't bother back stitching because ultimately I am going to be trimming off all of these bits, all of the ends. So now I'm going to go for this mint color, and I think I'll make it a little bit taller. And you're going to sew it together. And then I think I'll do one more before I press. I found that if I do more than 4 or 5 books before I press, it will get really crooked and I'll have to do a lot of trimming. And even after you press with just say 4 or 5, you still want to square off and press really good and square off each time. So let's see, and we'll go just a little bit higher. Okay, so I'm going to press that, and remember this is my template. Let's say this is the length that I want it. So I'm going to press and I'm going to trim here and I'm going to trim here, and then I'm going to square it off on my cutting mat and make sure that this is squared off so that we don't start leaning one way or another. Okay, so here it is pressed, and I did have to trim off a little bit here as I squared it up. And then we just continue. We do the next little group of 4 or 5 strips. So let's just keep on going. So I wanted to point out this one strip. This is different from the others in that I used the main fabric prints for this. They feature gorgeous illustrations that I didn't want to accidentally slice through. And so I actually fussy cut around the illustrations. Let's see, here you can see one where it's got the little mouse family. And so I just made sure to cut individual strips and do these the way I would a scrappy quilt. I cut them and sewed each one individually and added that on. Okay, so let's keep on piecing this together. Okay, I want to show something that came up as I was making the border. I noticed I have a white space here, and I thought it would be nice, instead of having books go all the way to the end, to continue with some of that white space. So what I did is I just added a strip of the Riley Blake Cloud Confetti Cotton, and I think I'm going to match it up right there when I sew it. So in order to do that though, I do not like to do math on my quilt borders. I don't care if they're super exact. And so this might not be exact, but what I did is I kept sewing all my books until I got to the other end, and then I added another white strip when I felt like I was close. As it is, I think we're going to, oh, and I didn't even intend for those to be the same, but that is a happy accident. I think I might be about a 1/4 inch off And honestly, I don't care. That's fine with me. And then I'll sew this, and then at the end I'll just trim the edges so that they're flush with these two sides that have already been done. So it's easy to get the sides done, and then with the top you're going to keep going and trim afterwards. Okay, so my border is done, and now I'm going to take it to my cutting mat, and I'm going to trim 1/4 inch off of each side, which will take me down to 9 inches. And some of you can see some areas are really uneven, like right here, and that will just even everything out and have it ready to sew onto the quilt. Okay, so now I'm going to pin, well, I don't even have to pin it, but I'm going to line this up so that this seam lines up with this seam right here. And then we're just going to do our 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so I am close now, and I'm actually a lot more than 1/4 inch. I'm about 1 inch off, and that's totally fine with me. We're still going to get white border to white border, and I think it's going to look great. If you want them to be more exact, feel free to try to do the math. For me, I think that looks fantastic. So we'll get that pressed, and then we'll work on the bottom border, and then we can show you the entire quilt. I have my last border pieced and ready to go, so now I'm going to trim it, and I'm just going to trim 1/4 off on each side. And that just gives us a more even edge to work with. And you'll notice I folded this over on itself. It's just easier when you have a smaller cutting mat to do that. Again, this is such a forgiving project. However you need to do it is great. And there we have it. It is ready to go. And then I wanted to point out one thing with the previous border. You remember I matched up this corner, and actually I don't like this as much as I like the more uneven corner. So this next time on this bottom border, I am going to make them uneven on purpose. So I am just going to come in about 1 inch. Oops, got a needle and thread on there. Come in about 1 inch, pin that in place. And that's all I'm going to pin. And then I'm just going to start sewing. So let's just move ourselves over, and we'll sew on this border. Okay, so here we have our finished border, and as you can see, you can adjust this size to border size for any quilt that you're doing. You can make it small, you can make the width of the book shapes thinner, however you want to do it. It's very forgiving, especially if you're going to add on this white section or whatever, the same color as your background of your books. If you add that on to the end, then you don't have to do math going to the end of it. So it's very forgiving and super easy, and I can't wait to show you the finished quilt.